Foreign policy has been a priority with Iran's outgoing government. A landmark deal was struck early in Hassan Rouhani's 8 years in office. That was the JCPOA, which won't be revived by Iran's June the 18th presidential elections Friday. So, it will be a major challenge the next president will inherit, alongside several other foreign policy challenges. However, each challenge can be transformed into an opportunity of equal weight if handled with the right proportions of recognition, diplomacy, and firmness. What challenges will the next president face besides the 2015 JCPOA or Iran nuclear deal? Which ones ought he prioritize and turn into an opportunity, and how? These are questions we'll be answering with a look at the legacy passed down by the current administration here on Iran Today. Welcome to another election special with me, Leila Faramarzi. To begin with the present administration's pet policy, the JCPOA was both a milestone achievement and a heavy weight that fell back on the country when the former US administration unilaterally withdrew from it in 2018. Mr. Hassan Beheshtipour is a steadfast believer in that nuclear deal. He joined us on Skype to walk us through the Rouhani era and paint a picture of a future in the hands of any of today's 7 presidential candidates.
Mr. Rouhani managed to resolve an international dispute and to put an end to documentations against Iran, which had been ongoing for 12 years, by negotiating the JCPOA. This is significant. Some people inside the country indeed believe that the JCPOA didn't bring economic benefits for Iran. But the point is that the most important achievement of the deal was putting an end to the documentations against Tehran's nuclear program. They had made serious accusations against Iran, which, under the deal's so-called past and future issues, ended forever in November 2015 in the Board of Governors. This was a huge achievement. These were the issues that were used to pass 6 resolutions against Iran and put it under Article 7 of the United Nations Charter, unfairly describing it as a threat to international peace and stability.
So, it will be a major challenge the next president will inherit, one of several foreign policy challenges, if the current government doesn't conclude talks before the new government takes office on August the 3rd. That will likely be a principalist government skeptical of the US and the West. But then, decisions on strategic issues are not ultimately the government's to make alone. The president does chair the Supreme National Security Council, SNSC, and has some influence on its composition. And strategic decisions are often made in a consensual manner, but ultimately they require the approval of the leader of the revolution. Now, in this stage, talks are being facilitated by Europe, or are they? The JCPOA was signed between Iran and the P5+1. That's the US, UK, France, Russia, China, and Germany. It was to limit Iran's peaceful nuclear program in return for sanctions relief for this country. Trump's America pulled out and made sure that doesn't happen. Iran remains committed in a deal that Western European parties purported to rescue by devising a way around US sanctions and the dollar for trade transactions. That didn't materialize, and today they are simply intermediaries in Vienna talks. But the talks are close to overspilling beyond the Rouhani government's lifespan and its JCPOA partners' golden opportunity. Perhaps Europe's ultimate goal is not to get the JCPOA back on its feet.
Mr. Rouhani invested too heavily in ties with Europe. The Europeans showed that they were powerless in the face of the US monetary hegemony, because when Trump withdrew from the JCPOA, or in other words, ended his commitments under the deal, the Europeans were unable to uphold the 11-point pledges they had made to Iran. Therefore, one of the mistakes Mr. Rouhani's government made was being over-reliant on the Europeans, who didn't do anything for us. But of course, Europe stood against against the US demand for triggering the so-called snapback mechanism, rejecting it with 11 abstained votes. Also, the Europeans abstained from voting for a US proposed draft resolution seeking an indefinite extension to an arms embargo on Iran.
Of course, Europe's approach may not be a determining factor, as US President Biden insists on the continuation of Trump policies as leverage in negotiations. Europe's role is actually one of coordinator, and it is using its capacities to help in pressuring Iran into accepting terms beyond JCPOA demands. That is to control or even scrap this country's defensive ballistic missile program and its influence in West Asia. Two demands Iran finds outrageous and insulting. Iran also does have the opportunity of showing more goodwill by accepting FATF terms and agreeing to return to full compliance with the deal in return for the US's lifting of only nuclear deal-related sanctions, FATF being the Anti-Money Laundering Financial Action Task Force. But this country feels no obligation because it was the US that pulled out of the deal to begin with, and that was a deal that laid Iran bare to surveillance and sabotage. Talking of turning challenges and problems into opportunities, Iran and Europe have plenty of common interests to consider in matters such as energy, the fight against drugs, the fight against terrorism, and advanced technologies to enjoy. The path to getting there is détente and confidence building that would result in purposeful interaction. But that's enough on a single deal that Iran cast most all of its chips into. There's a world beyond out there. In the absence of a Western alliance, Russia and China have been powerful allies to Iran, even overpoweringly so. By 2019, China had gained control of under 48.5% of Iran's exports and 27.5% of the country's imports. There's no place like home, and it's regional alliances that Iran and its neighbors must recall for their very livelihood in their match against nature itself. Water scarcity paints a scary future when 12 out of the 17 most water-stressed states in the world are in the Middle East and North Africa. Iran and its Arab neighbors to the south must cooperate to promote water security while minimizing harm to the Persian Gulf's ecology. Attention tends to focus on geopolitical challenges and economic exchange, but working together on water might open the way for meaningful cooperation on other issues. Focusing on the usual concerns, however, Mr. Beheshtipour talks of lost time with Saudi Arabia.
Mr. Rouhani's failure included Iran's relations with Saudi Arabia. Of course, those who stormed the Saudi embassy and set it on fire were responsible for the strained relations, but Mr. Rouhani was unable to improve the ties afterward. This continued until recently, before negotiations with Saudi Arabia kicked off. We hope the talks are successful, because resolving the problems between Iran and Saudi Arabia will have a considerable impact on ending the devastating war on Yemen. It will also leave a positive impact on Iraq's stability and security. While we're on the subject of neighbors, the current government got to enhance ties with Turkey, Iraq and Afghanistan. And it's got to solve some problems with its Azerbaijan ties, as well as differences in relation to Turkmenistan and the purchase of gas. Our analyst awarded Rouhani and his foreign policy team that praise, but said how balance must be maintained henceforth. The sum of it all sketches a close-up of Iran in total, its situation and status on the world scene. Geopolitics are a determining factor. Iran is the bridge between East and West, and any government can make the most of this natural positioning if it plays its cards right. Another important point about Iran is its population. Iran is a country of over 80 million. Its people are highly educated. Its youth have excellent abilities and have shown them in different historic projects, like the nuclear program. They are self-reliant and have been able to do a lot. Therefore, Iran has the capacity to produce knowledge. It has the power of its population. It has economic power. Ultimately, to our guests, the most important political game now is the challenge and opportunity that is the very JCPOA. Iran can live without it, but should it come to an agreement over that nuclear deal, it will have found a well-designed pattern for international exchanges. And those will facilitate better utilization of domestic capacities even.
That'll be all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with city and village council elections and functions. So do join us at the same times. Bye for now.